So now let's look at applying the same label that we just made in the last tutorial to a slightly more complex object. So this is a two-sided glass, so I just revolved a curve around, nothing special. But when you do something like this, you'll get different types of UVs. So you could make a cup like this in different ways. So let's say I create a quick polygon cylinder. I'm going to move it over and drag it up. I'm just going to change some of the quality, subdivision height, subdivision cap. So let's say I just take these faces. Mine's not cooperating with me. I'm going to change one of my settings here. I always like to select faces based on their centers rather than by the whole face. So just select these faces. I've probably selected the bottom faces too. Just hold Control. Yeah. So now if I just scale this up and then do an extrude. My self divisions. Then I've made a cup again, right? Whiskey tumbler, something like that. And I can smooth it and get something like this. Now, the UVs for each of these will be quite different. Go to the UV editor. For this one, well, this is actually a bit of a bad example, but you can see that we still have our barrel here, and then the caps, but the caps have changed a little bit because I've extruded some of these things in. If I go into one mode, it looks exactly the same as a basic cylinder because this is a 2D space, but these were extruded down in depth, right? So they're actually faces that are hidden in here. So if we wanted to separate out this inner wall to UV map it, then we'd have to do a UV projection or something like that. But if we look at this one that I revolved from just a basic curve, let me come on. So you can see it's just something like this. I just revolve this curve around. Just hide that again. You can see that it's got UVs that are nice and flat, and there's nothing overlapping in it, but it's huge. The quadrant that we can work with is actually this little space down here. When you use the NURBS modeling tools under surfaces, loft, planar, revolve, all these things, they actually make nice clean UVs because that's the way NURBS work. And when you convert to polygons, then you inherit those clean UVs, which is great. But they're often outside of the 0 to 1 UV space. So all you got to do is right click and go to UV and just scale this down and move it into space here. And I'm just going to scale it this way. So you can see I'm changing the shape of it. It doesn't really matter, although it will change how the texture is laid out on the surface, but we just have to account for that in the way we adjust the 2D placement node. Okay, so anyway, something like that. Just don't go outside of these lines, the 0 to 1 lines. Okay. And you'll notice that when I hit smooth in 3D, it actually smooths the UVs as well. Anyway, so we already have our texture made, right? So if we go into the Hypershade, and we'll grab our shader. So I'm just selecting it here. Your layout would be different. The browser is usually up here. I'm just going to map this out. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's for the floor. This one's called label glass. So I'm just going to assign it to this glass that I've made. And you'll see that even though it's the same material that worked on that last cup, the shader is being applied in the wrong spot, right? So we've got to fix that. So let's open the UV text, the UV editor, select this thing. And so it looks right here, but it means that this must be the top of the glass and this must be the bottom of the glass, or vice versa. So the U and V's are reversed. So I can just, grab these UVs and I can rotate it around until it's working properly. And I can use the J tool to rotate in increments. I'm going to undo and do that from the beginning. So, something like that. And I want to make sure it's on the outside, because it could go onto the inside, because part of this UV map is the inside. Yeah, so I can move this down. You can see it slides inside the cup. I'm sorry this is so small. Let me just make this a bit bigger for a moment. Right? So we just want to make sure it's placed in the right spot, but we don't really want to push this outside of the 0 to 1 UV space. So I'll just leave it in the middle and I'll actually move this texture down, just like we did before with the Place 2D texture node. So in the attribute, the attribute editor, we can translate the frame, so U and V. So the translate frame 0.35, I don't want to change the U direction, but the V direction. Whoops, not 0. So that's pretty good placement. It's a little too tall. It's a little too short. That's pretty good. Is that on the outside? Yeah, that's on the outside. So now if I'm just going to save my file. If we render this, that looks pretty good. Now it looks like it's on the other side, is it? No, it's just reflecting internally. So that looks a little weird. I think we can correct that actually with the glass shader that I made here. I'm sure there's a setting for internal reflections, specular, transmission. Oh, under advanced. So let's see, will this solve it? Not at all. That's a little bit weird. Maybe that's what it should be doing. That doesn't seem quite right though. Yeah, it does look like a reflection on the other side. But if we go around to this side, we shouldn't. Oh, we do see it. Okay, so there's something weird happening. Hold on. Okay, I see the problem. I made a mistaken assumption about how the UVs are laid out when you use those NURBS modeling tools. In fact, it's not perfectly flat. It's actually showing this as sort of a collapsed cylinder. And you can see that in my UV space, it's showing up as purple or pinkish color. And that shows you, blue shows the outside surface, so the part where the normals are facing out, so the outside surface here, or the outside surface here. And then the inside of this surface would be the part inside the wall here. That would render as red. And when they overlap each other, when you've got parts that face in and parts that face out, with UV sitting on top of each other, you get this kind of purple color. So in fact, what we need to do is to regenerate the UVs for this. And so what we can do is just go to object mode. And since this is kind of cylindrical shaped, we can select the object, go to UV cylindrical, it's under the create area. And we can grab this handle and let me open this up so we can see. So this is just how the UVs are being projected onto the surface. If I open up the UV editor again, we can still see that we have showing up as mix of red and blue, and that's because this UV projector, this cylindrical shape on the outside, is looking through and seeing the outside here, but then seeing the inside of the cup in there. So we just have to separate those things out. So we want to separate the inside from the outside. So to do that, I'm just going to go into 5 mode here so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to go into edge mode, and I can just click around here. And when I did that, it selects the edge loop going around, and you can see it selects a group of edges here, and I can go to cut, so, or Shift X. So now we should have 2 separate UV shells, I think. Let's hope. So if we right click here and go to UVs, select UVs, so that should select one UV in here, and it has. Command right click to UV shell. Yeah. So you can see that's the outside of the glass, this is the inside, and there's some weird UVs here. But this is red, this is blue. We want it all to be blue. So we're going to take this and flip it around. There's a flip tool somewhere. Oh, I'm missing this part of my window. So let's see. Transform, move, tools, flip. Right, so I flipped that one that I had selected, so now they're all blue. And we got these weird, this is probably the base of the cup, and this is the inner base of the cup. But let's not worry about those things too much since we're not texturing them anyway. Oops. So let's select this whole UV shell again, just to make sure, got the whole thing. And then this is the outside of the cup, so we're just going to select this, scale it down. Right, this is where we want the texture to be. This is the inside of the cup, and we don't care about this so much, so we can just shrink it down to fit into that space. I'm kind of breaking my rules about the UV sticking out here, but I'm just being a little untidy. Okay, so now we have the inner part of the cup and the outer part of the cup separated, and that's where we want the label to be. So now let's see if this is working. Oh, I'm going to turn off that representation of those colors. Yeah, so the medicine label is right there. That's pretty good. It's a little bit squished, so we could still just go back in and change the 2D texture, place 2D texture node here until we get it looking the way we want it to look. So the coverage in U is probably too high. That's good. Or maybe I'm going to go back and just make the coverage in V higher. So we just have a bigger label. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, have we fixed the problem? Yes. So it doesn't appear on the backside anymore. I was fooling myself to think those were internal reflections. And again, it looks a little bit stretched out here, so U is the direction we want to change here, 0.3. Then we can correct that a little bit. So again, it's all about getting the UVs working the way you want, and then doing a simple thing. Out alpha of the label has to go into transmission weight. We might have to run through a reverse node, and then if we want the color from this label to go into the color that's painted on the surface of the glass, we have to take the out color of your file node and go into the base color here. Anyway, I hope that helps, and sorry that I got a little confused in the middle there. Good Good luck.